Hello, Jasmine.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm so happy to be joining you today.
Yes. So this is season 3 of Niche Conversations, first episode. And I'm Jessica DeWitt. I'm one of the editors here at the Network in Canadian History and Environment. And today I am joined by Jazmine Aldrich of the Archives Association of Ontario. Do you want to tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jasmine. I graduated history from Bishop's University and completed a Master's of Information Studies at McGill University. So I'm from Quebec. I'm joining you from the unceded territory of the Abenaki people in the Wabanaki Nation in southern Quebec. But I am the Archeon coordinator for the Archives Association of Ontario. And I've been in this position since April of this year.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's what we're here to talk about today. You wrote a post for us kind of introducing the database, and so we're going to chat about it today. So to start off, what is Archeon?
Yeah, happy to tell you. So Archeon is Ontario's archival information network. It's an initiative of the Archives Association of Ontario, and it was actually launched in the year 2000, so it's been around for over 22 years now. It is an archival database. It serves both as a discovery portal for archival records held in Ontario and generally about Ontario for the most part. And it also serves as a directory to archives and other cultural heritage institutions that have archival holdings in the province of Ontario. It can be used to discover both digital records, of which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about, but also there are descriptions of non-digital records that can be found in these heritage institutions across the province. And yeah, generally it's descriptions of archival holdings, descriptions of the creators of those archival holdings, and descriptions of the institutions that curate those archival records.
Cool. Yeah, you're saying that it's been around since the 2000, and I had no idea it existed when I was doing my dissertation. One of my provinces that I was looking at was Ontario, and I'm in Saskatchewan. So this would have been super helpful for me because, when you do research trips as a grad student, you only have such a small amount of time. So, and it's hard to know what's there beforehand. And I feel like this would have helped me a bit to kind of, the smaller societies as well that I could have dropped, an afternoon at or something. So that's really cool. I'm glad I know about it now.
Yeah,
So that's why we write these posts, right? This is why public history is so important.
absolutely.
So, of course, we do environmental history primarily here. And your post focuses on that. So I thought maybe next you could tell us a bit about how environmental historians specifically can find Archeon useful.
Yeah, for sure. So, like you were touching on, one thing that's really valuable about Archeon is that it can help to discover holdings at smaller archival institutions that may not otherwise have the means to necessarily publicize their catalogs, their descriptions of their holdings. So, I think that's one really strong point of Archeon for any kind of research. But specifically, if we're talking about environmental history, one thing that I was thinking about is that sometimes I think environmental history, it's obvious to go for the big, obviously environmental records. So speaking from personal experience, I've worked with Data Rescue Archives and Weather out of McGill University, and they have archival records of weather ledgers that were kept at the observatory at McGill. So that's an obvious archival resource for environmental history. But there are a lot of other valuable archival records that could be used for that kind of historical research, like daily journals from who knows who in Ontario, that's
Mm-hmm.
in some tiny little town that you wouldn't even think to look at. So it's really valuable to have these descriptions. Another strong point to Archeon is that it's a multi-repository database, and it's members of the AAO that contribute their descriptions. So you can do subject-based research across institutions. So
Cool.
yeah, obviously environmental history is so broad. There are so many different
Yep.
directions you could go in it. But if you pick a particular subject, like if you're doing climate research or, I don't know, researching flora and fauna, you can search by subject and you'll have archival records from multiple different institutions, ranging from religious archives, school archives, municipal, government. So it really runs the gamut of everything there is out there. And I just think there are a lot of unique hidden gems that you may not otherwise, run across. But yeah, if you want to learn more about how to find those records, I wrote about it in my article. So there's my cheap plug for this session.
Yeah, there's a very kind of like a source specific examples and some directions in that post, so people should definitely check it out.
Yeah,
how many associations or archives do you have in the database? Do you know?
Currently there are 192, but they aren't all active and they don't contribute to the same degree. So a few years ago, because of the provincial acquisition strategy to try to help archives accumulate records that are local to them, there were very basic repository descriptions added to the database for institutions across Ontario, but some of them have then contributed, hundreds or thousands of descriptions, and others it's just a basic description kind of to serve as a directory to point to those institutions.
Cool. I'm I'm the type of person who's like, ooh, I would love to be the person who's entering this database, and I love like repetitive, like, I don't know, tasks like that.
Yeah.
I was an archival intern for a small historical society one summer in undergrad, and that was my job, was just to like, all the new acquisitions I would just type out, and the genealogies I would get to type in every single name that came up in the genealogies. I was like, ooh. So anyways, that's what the kind of person I am.
Yeah, I am the exact same kind of person. I can promise you I deeply relate to that sentiment. And I've done very similar work and found great joy in it.
Excellent. Well, I guess this is the perfect job for you then.
Yeah, I like to think so.
Yeah. So I thought we'd conclude. I was thinking your post got me thinking about how during the pandemic, particularly the first couple of years, a lot of people weren't able to research, or almost no one was able to research. And I think beforehand we had, the digitization of archival resources was important, but I think it really came to the forefront for historians during the pandemic. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on how Archeon fits into like this movement of digitization, and if you see any, ways that this is evolving into the future.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny that you ask this, because I wrote another blog post very recently, and it was titled "Digital Access, Pandemic Responses, and the Future of Archives." It's on activehistory.ca. So I'm basically going to summarize some of the things that I said in that blog post, but people are welcome to read that too. But yeah, Archeon has accommodated digital objects, so digitized archival materials, since 2010, when it moved to ICA Atom, access to memory archival software. So there have been digital objects in Archeon since 2010. But there definitely, I was actually looking at this when I was writing the article for Active History, there has been an increase since the pandemic. Specifically, I wrote this article in July 2022, so I have some stats, but they're as of July, so it's more than that now. But since March 2020, over 15,000 descriptions were added to Archeon, varying levels. It could be font or collection, the highest level of description typically in an archives, or all the way down to a single item. So, a single ledger, a photo, a postcard, things like that. But 15,000 descriptions, more than 15,000, and more than 6,000 digital objects were added to the database since then. So that's a large proportion of the digital objects that are currently available. It's definitely, there's been an increase. The other thing to note about that is where people are accessing the database from. So we use Google Analytics, so we're able to see a little bit about where visitors are coming from. And I thought it was really interesting, since March 2020 up until July 2022, there were 200,000, excuse me, visits to Archeon and 1.1 million page views. So I was looking at where these people were visiting from, and understandably, over 28,000 were from Ontario. That's to be expected, obviously,
Yep.
with a database dedicated to Ontario's history. But 34,000 were from elsewhere in Canada. So it's interesting to note that. And 26,000 were from outside of Canada. So at a time when people couldn't actually go in to do archival research, we're seeing that there's a lot of people visiting, not only from within the province when you couldn't even travel regionally, but from elsewhere in Canada and from everywhere in the world. I looked and it was every continent except Antarctica, which is to be expected, I would think, because I think there's a lot of penguins in Antarctica. Um, so yeah, so all of that I talked about in that blog post on active history. And I also compared the 2-year period of 2018 to 2020 to the period of 2020 to 2022. And there's a great increase of traffic from countries outside of Canada to Archeon. One country, I can't remember where it was, I want to say Indonesia, but anyway, it's in that article, was a 600% increase in traffic to Archeon. Yeah, so I think it's really valuable that people are still able to do this kind of research in a different way, and especially now that a lot of things are being digitized. But a lot of things also aren't being digitized for a number of reasons. Digitization is expensive, it's time consuming. A lot of institutions don't have the financial or human resources to do that kind of work. So it's something that's important to talk about in the archival community now, because there has been such a demand for it since a lot of things have really gone online. So yeah, I mean, where it's going, I don't think that the push for digitization will slow down. I think the cat's out of the bag at this point, so to speak. So
Yeah.
where, you know, we can't really go back from that. And I don't think that we should, but I think that the future will also include copyright considerations, because there are a lot of things that can't be digitized or can't be shared in certain ways right now. So that's a big question. And there's also specific cultural sharing protocols that need to be considered with materials relating to Indigenous communities, for example, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities in Canada. So there's a conversation that needs to be had around those kinds of materials too. But my hope is that with digitization and with a push for greater access to archives, there's going to be an increase in hearing these marginalized and silenced voices from archives, and really including more people in the story of Canadian history, because I think that's really important for where we are and other social shifts that we've seen in the past few years. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a fire truck going by.
I can, but
okay,
fun.
Yeah, I was like really building up the momentum of what I was saying there. But yeah, I think it's important to see that representation, and I think that digitization naturally leads to greater access. And I'm really passionate about archives being accessible to a greater number of people, a diversity of communities, and letting that enrich our understanding of Canadian history. And environment is part of that. So we can't forget that. And yeah, there's also, I hope that digital platforms like Archeon will be able to include greater input from a variety of communities to kind of add context to records that are digitized, and better inclusive, accurate, respectful, descriptive practices. All these things are really important, and they're really big in the archives community right now. So it's topics that I'm following closely to make sure that Archeon is reflecting the world that we live in today, right? It's been around since 2000, but a lot has changed since then. So we've got a ways to go.
Absolutely. But yeah, 22 years is a long time, particularly in the digital world, the digital space. So
yeah, actually,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off. I was looking at Internet Archive's captures of what
Yeah.
Archeon looked like the
Oh,
year that it was
cool.
released, and it's so cool to be able. I mean, that's the power of the internet, right?
Yeah.
I can open my browser and see what it looked like in the year 2000. So it's pretty cool. If anyone wants to check it out, send me an email. I'll send you the link.
Cool. Yeah, that's neat.
Mhm.
Yeah, all of this is very interesting. I'm a academic who has left academia. Like I'm kind of academic adjacent. So
Mm.
any research that I do in the future is going to probably be on my own dime or my own time. And the ability to travel like I used to is just probably not going to be in the cards for me.
Mhm.
So the digitization of these sources is kind of pivotal. It's like really crucial for me if I'm going to be continuing to do my own research. And I think a lot of people are in that as well. As fewer and fewer people are, going into the tenure track arena, and more kind of going out on their own, or if they're precarious and don't have research funds, etc. So
Mhm.
that's kind of where I'm thinking of the angle I'm thinking of it at the moment. But I love the other points that you brought up as well. Uh,
Yeah.
and I personally, I did a quick look at Archeon, but I'm like super excited now to like dive in. and
Good.
I'm
I'm glad.
and I'm glad you wrote this piece for our site because I don't know how I didn't know about it.
Oh,
But
good.
thank you for joining me today. This is great.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And if ever you find records in Archeon that aren't digitized, the
Yeah,
contact information for those repositories is also included in Archeon. So you can send them an
cool.
email or give them a call, and a lot of places will digitize things upon request. Sometimes there's a fee or not, but it's a
Awesome.
great way to do that research without having to travel too. Because Ontario is huge, even within Ontario,
Yeah, yeah.
the travel is crazy. So,
Yes, it is.
all
Well,
right.
I'm gonna put links to your niche piece as well as the active history piece that you mentioned
Oh,
into our
thank you.
stories, and perhaps share them on Twitter as well. And thank you for joining me, Jazmine.
That's
Take
my
care.
pleasure. Thank you so much, Jessica. Thanks, everybody. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.